We love our pets here on CityCast Boise, and we all want to give them the care they deserve, including our aquatic friends, which is why we're excited to talk about Fly-In Vet. Fly-In Vet makes house calls and can help with any fish health or water issue. You'll get excellent care for your pets from Dr. Becker, a board-certified aquatic veterinarian. Make an appointment today. Call 208-260-0327 or go to flyinvet.com. That's flyinvet.com.
Today on CityCast Boise, Idaho leaders took part in a secretive trip to Israel, raising questions about influence and transparency as attacks escalate in Gaza. Meanwhile, ICE wants to bulk up its Boise office, signaling a heavier hand in enforcement. And on a lighter note, we're heading into pumpkin patch and corn maze season. It's the perfect excuse for a little fall fun. It's Friday, September 19th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Happy Friday, everyone. Joining me this week, it's a real treat, George Prentice, host of Morning Edition on Boise State Public Radio. Thanks for being here this week, George.
Thanks for the invite, Lindsay. Thank you.
I am so glad you're here this week because Boise State Public Radio actually got the scoop on a very interesting story, and that's that several Idaho representative legislators were in Israel this week. The timing for that was not good, though. The UN Commission just announced that they did find Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, and Israel started their ground offensive in Gaza this week as well.
Indeed.
What maybe were your biggest takeaways from this story?
Well, I have to tell you, Lindsay, that the backstory of how we got this story is almost as interesting as the story itself, because it took us the better part of 12 hours to put this story together. And as you know, in the world of radio, that usually means about a 60-second story. But a lot was involved. Bottom line, nobody wanted to talk. Nobody wanted to even confirm this. So there was some chatter on social media that a number of American legislators were in Israel. And then a photo appeared, a really big group photo. I'm talking about, it seemed as if there were somewhere between 75 and 100 people in this photo. And somebody said, hey, isn't that, well, fill in the blank. And then we started chatting in the newsroom and started to identify, hold on, isn't this Representative Rebel? Isn't this? So we started, going through the list and we started counting them up. We had to find another way to confirm the story. And we did through more photos from the Times of Israel, from a newspaper in Israel. But the bottom line is that Idaho representatives are part of a delegation on an Israeli-sponsored trip. They are in Jerusalem on a trip sponsored by the Israeli government. And speaking to the delegation at a press conference this week, Prime Minister Netanyahu called it the biggest delegation of legislators ever to visit Israel. That's kind of stunning. But then he made some very interesting remarks. He told the legislators, which is to say the Idaho legislators and other, quote, the boycotters must be boycotted. It turns out that this conference is designed to encourage American lawmakers to be pro-Israel. Well, that may be okay at a very high level, but in particular in this really caustic environment. And in this week in particular, there's a million questions, right? So let's name the names.
Yeah.
Let's call out who the representatives are. There are Idaho House Republican legislators Barbara Ehart of Idaho Falls, Representative Josh Tanner of Eagle, Representative Bruce Skog of Napa, Representative John Schertz of Weiser, and then Democratic House Representative Alana Rubel of Boise. So they are part of this group. So we finally did get enough confirmations to run with this story. And then, and only then, did Representative Rubel get back to us with a comment. And she said, and I want to make sure that I've got her words right, she said, We were assured that our attendance is not an endorsement of the current government, but rather an opportunity to learn and ask. No Idaho taxpayer funds were used for this trip. But to be sure, I think most of us know what a junket is,
Yeah.
and which is to say someone else is picking up the tab. But when a government is picking up the tab, it's their messaging, right? So a million questions about this. On the very day that Israel's attack on Gaza had been ramped up to the degree that ground forces were moving in. And I guess that's the key. Ground forces. We're talking door to door ground forces going into Gaza City. And the devastation is greater than ever. And the mission, everyone agrees, is occupation. Wow. Boy, that's a shadow that is long and wide.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really curious your thoughts on this, George. So when Representative Ilana Rubel said, "Don't worry, no Idaho taxpayer money was spent," that didn't actually make me feel better. Like, I have some concerns about foreign governments paying for our representatives to go on trips there, while Amnesty International, the UN, the International Court of Justice, the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem Salam has all said that that country is committing genocide.
With the big exception, though, our White House doesn't agree.
Yeah.
And obviously President Netanyahu doesn't agree, even though many of his constituents actually would agree.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, Representative Rubel's comments, no Idaho taxpayer funds were used for this trip, that sounds like an answer to some other question.
Yeah.
In other words, on something else. To your point, I don't know if that actually gives us any greater comfort. In fact, wouldn't it have been a little bit more transparent if it was independent? If it was, in other words, that Idaho paid its own way? A million questions.
Did you get a chance to see the photo that the Idaho-Israel Alliance put up on Facebook and Instagram?
I did. In fact, I have to admit that I was not familiar with the Idaho-Israel Alliance, other than to learn since then that it is a number of other alliances in other states, and they're basically what they're known for is planting trees around Israel. So yes, and here we are. It is our lovely group of Idaho lawmakers planting a tree in Israel. And they say special thanks to the Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
And I want people to know that the name of this conference was 50 States, One Israel.
Yeah.
I have a lot of thoughts about that.
Well, it is a campaign, right?
Yeah.
It's a direct campaign.
Whether these representatives want to publicly acknowledge or not, this is a publicity moment. This is a moment that they're trying to push messaging. Netanyahu and Israeli leadership have said the entire point of this was to prevent boycotts against Israel. Mm-hmm. And other legislators in other states who were invited to this conference have said that they didn't go. Ohio State Senator Beth Liston specifically said, "I knew that this was a propaganda-sponsored trip. I did not want to be used as a tool in support of the Israeli government's actions." It seems like some legislators were aware of the purpose of this trip as a way to promote Israel's perspective in the world, and they acknowledge that they are being excluded, that different groups no longer want to do business with them or interact with them. And this is a way to try to preemptively stop that in the United States. Do you think our legislators were just unaware of this? Do you think they view it differently?
No, these are smart people, and goodness knows they're politically astute. To your point, I think it's fair to be pro-Israel, but also to recognize when you are being used. These lawmakers are being paraded around Israel with President Netanyahu, and he is controlling the messaging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I do want to make it clear for listeners also that Idaho does have a law, Idaho Statute 67-2346, that makes it illegal to boycott Israel, for Idaho businesses to boycott Israel. It's known as the Anti-Boycott Against Israel Act. And it says that a public entity in this state may not enter into a contract with a company to acquire or dispose of services, supplies, information technology, or construction unless the contracts include a written certification that the company is not currently engaged in and will not, for the duration of the contract, engage in a boycott of goods or services from Israel or territories under its control. George, do we have laws about that for any other country?
Not that I know of, because I do remember when this measure surfaced and was passed, and it passed overwhelmingly. And it makes perfect sense that a state like Idaho would have something like this in a pro-Israel stance. But we also have to take a snapshot of when it was passed and what has happened, particularly what has been happening in the last few months. Again, I think it's more than fair to be pro-Israel or to be against boycotts, etc. But shouldn't that be our choice as opposed to the Israeli government paying our way on basically a junket in their country, again, where they're controlling the messaging? This is a nuanced conversation at best, and I don't know how nuanced it can get when it's one-sided.
I agree. And I think a lot of people can have a lot of different perspectives on this. I think it's also mature and a nuanced way to look at it that we reevaluate our relationship with a foreign government when major organizations credibly say that foreign government is engaging in genocide.
But again, our government is not.
Yes. No. And yeah, our White House is not saying that.
Yeah.
I do think, though, when other major organizations say it, that is a good time to reevaluate how we want to engage with that foreign government.
So interesting, because this week our president is visiting the UK in a week where Prime Minister Starmer is basically recognizing the state of Palestine. So a number, European nations have made it very clear that they have significant boycotts of Israel. But again, our president is pretty good friends with the Israeli president, and we, at least as a White House, stand by Israel.
This fall, treat yourself to a trip to wine country in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. The Walla Walla Valley is home to more than 130 wineries, offering vineyard experiences and delicious wine tastings. Bonus, grape harvest is happening soon. Besides incredible wines, Walla Walla has a walkable, historic downtown core to explore. There's plenty of farm-fresh dining options, from celebrated chefs to treat yourself to. Go at your own pace around town, do as much or as little as you want. And here's a thought: September is a beautiful time to take a scenic road trip to Walla Walla, just 4 hours away from Boise. Go to wallawalla.org to plan your visit today. That's wallawalla.org.
Okay, George, let's pivot back a little bit more to what's happening here in Boise right now. And a headline that really caught my eye, and several different sources are reporting on this, is that ICE is planning to renovate their office space in Boise. And it's quite the renovation. It's a $1.37 million renovation plan that they've submitted. I think that means ICE is planning to definitely be more active here, definitely lay down some more solid roots. What has really jumped out to you this week about this story? Because it seems like ICE is definitely going to be more active here if they're planning on renovating their office.
Sure. And renovation is just a fancy word for expansion right now. I think 1.7 million means, well, my goodness, they are here to stay. By the way, a number of federal agencies or departments rent space, government space on, I think it's Vanell Way. It's out near the mall. And including ICE has been renting some space. So that's not that unusual. But what this means is more space, which is to say probably more staff. So let's walk this back. We have Immigration and Customs Enforcement is indeed a significant presence here in Idaho. And for the record, the arrests and detentions in Idaho have seen the highest percentage increase in the nation this year. The highest percentage increase in the nation this year. So that's how active they are already. So yes, indeed, we confirmed as well that at the city of Boise, Erstead Architects, an architectural firm here in Boise, filed for a permit for expansion and renovation at Boise City Hall. But there are no details yet on what that means, what the expansion means. But it will need to go through a formal plan that will have to be made public. But let's consider that Governor Brad Little began committing state resources to ICE this year, specifically the Idaho National Guard assisting them. And then again, data revealing that immigration arrests and detentions are increasing sharply here in the Gem State.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting in the Idaho Statesman article about this. Idaho State Police Director Bill Gardner said that he didn't even have contact information for ICE until the new administration, the Trump administration, took office, and that ICE was basically non-existent in our state for the better part of a decade. So it seems like in a pretty short amount of time, not only have they ramped up the arrests they're making, but they're also really laying down roots here.
Yeah, so here are some numbers. The Idaho Capital Sun reported this. So from January through June of last year, so 2024, there were a total of 41 ICE arrests in Idaho, 41. Now compare that 41 to the number of arrests in the same period for this year, January through June of this year, 368 arrests. That's nearly an 800% increase.
I do also want to talk about what we've been seeing in Idaho with these arrests. In the Statesman article, they talked about how the agents have lowered the bar on who they're wanting to deport, and they're changing their tactics, including smashing car windows. I think a lot of us have seen these videos, but maybe didn't realize this is happening in our state too. They're using very aggressive tactics with these arrests. We didn't see that a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Some of the people who are most worried, and I guess we shouldn't be surprised at this, and maybe we should have seen this coming, are Idaho farmers, who right now it's harvest time. For instance, let's take the cherry harvest this year. Now, we have a fair amount of cherries here in Idaho, but in Washington and Oregon, et cetera, and Idaho, they didn't get the workers. And what turned out to be a really robust year of really ripe cherries on these trees were left unpicked because fear, right? And now we're coming into real harvest time across certainly the southern tier of Idaho and up into the Palouse, et cetera. And I think this is where farmers are really worried because of the fear of ICE detentions or arrests are keeping their workers away because they have heard of, nightmare situations like the one you just painted. I think this is about to play out in our grocery stores. Locally, we saw the price of cherries go through the roof because it turns out that there were so many cherries that were not picked because farmers couldn't get the workers because the workers are in such fear. So imagine this now across the board with all of the other produce that is about to be harvested.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I think there's so many industries where we're going to see this play out. I'm curious to see the impact on housing and construction and development in this area. We're still deep into a situation where we don't have enough housing, and there are so many large construction projects happening that rely on all kinds of different workers and employment. And I'm just very curious to see in the weeks and months leading into fall and winter what this is going to look like.
I think that's really a really good point, and we don't know those numbers yet. We always hear that it's a robust market for construction, new home construction, et cetera, but this has to be playing out in some form. And I'm wondering if we start seeing a downturn in construction of new homes just based on labor not being there.
All right, let's jump into our picks of the week. And to kick us off, courtesy of Visit Walla Walla, is the pick of Grammy-nominated soul artist Alan Stone. Now, he'll be live at the Motor Co. in the heart of downtown Walla Walla on Saturday, October 4th. Grab your tickets now so you can sip their exceptional world-class wines while soaking up Alan's powerful vocals and feel-good energy. Snag your tickets today at dossierwine.com/events. Thank you so much for that pick of the week from Visit Walla Walla.
And road trip, hello.
Yeah, exactly. This is the perfect season to take a little road trip out of Boise, get away for the weekend. So this is a really great pick of the week.
Oh, wow. And they're really coming into their just season of all seasons as far as the scenery. And oh my gosh, what a great, great road trip that would be right now.
Well, George, what is your pick of the week?
Well, my pick has to be any movie that was a product of Robert Redford. We lost Robert Redford this year, and indeed, he lived a really rich life. He died in his sleep at the age of 89 in his Utah home. So let's do a little timeline here. It was 1969 that Robert Redford, who was a somewhat under the radar, let's say, movie star. He had done a couple of movies, but then he was cast in a film called Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And all of a sudden, he came into a bit of money. So he went and bought a mountain in Utah.
Okay, yeah,
Turned out to be Sundance Mountain, right? and all of a sudden, it all begins. And over the years, we know of his creation and sustaining of the Sundance Film Festival, which really changed the face of independent film across the U.S. So fascinating because his career was so big, right? He was in like blockbusters, The Sting, The Way We Were, and so many others, right? But he always put his money back into his art. But Robert Redford was rather extraordinary in that he always had his eye on directing. So, as we know, in the early 1980s, his first time in directing, he directed Ordinary People. And what did he do? He went on to win the Oscar, and he went on to direct other movies like Quiz Show and the Milagro Beanfield War, and it was pretty amazing. So, Robert Redford, by the way, had some pretty great connections to Idaho. I thought I would share.
Oh yes, please, absolutely.
So 1972, Robert Redford brought a preview of a film that he had just made, which of course we all know, Jeremiah Johnson, to Pocatello. And the reason he brought the film to Pocatello was the movie was based on a book written by Vardis Fisher of Pocatello. And Jeremiah Johnson was based on Fisher's book, Mountain Man. That was in 1972. Then let's go to 1982 when Robert Redford was up in north central Idaho. He was kickstarting his Institute for Resource Management, which attracted University of Idaho students, which asked them to focus on achieving a proper balance between environmental and industrial interests. And then, of course, in 1989, he came to Boise. He was fundraising as a headliner for then Idaho Governor Cecil Andrus.
Really?
And Robert Redford filled the Morrison Center. And it was on that night that Carol Skinner of the Flicks, the owner of the Flicks, and at the time the Flicks was just, a small little one-screen theater, she ran backstage and cornered Robert Redford. She said, "Oh, Robert Redford, can we get your movie?" Now, Robert Redford had just directed A River Runs Through It, which in our part of the world is a little bit of a Bible for anyone who loves to fish. And he said, I don't know who you are, but I don't determine where my movies go. And she said, we would do anything if we got your movie. By the way, this is all a true story. A couple of weeks later, a person comes to the Flicks that Carol doesn't know. And by the way, it wasn't during when a film was showing, so it was kind of an off hour. And he introduced himself as a pretty big, highfalutin, a whoop-de-doo guy from a movie studio that was promoting A River Runs Through It. And he said, I got a call from Robert Redford about your theater. And she said, oh, that's so wonderful. And he said, you're a very small theater. This is a very big movie. You would have to run this movie nonstop for months. She said, we will run this movie as long as you want us to run this movie.
Wow.
And indeed, on opening night, there was a line around the block to see A River Runs Through It, and it ran, by the way, 4 months. Now, here is the best part of the story. Weeks later, many weeks later, Carol's told me this story many times. Carol goes to the bank to make her daily deposit. in other words, the receipts for that evening's business. And the teller said, would you like to see your balance? And Carol said, no. And the teller looks at her and says, would you like to see your balance? And Carol's like, okay. And she printed out the balance, and it was the first time that the Flicks was ever in the black.
Wow.
They went on to add a second screen, and then a third screen, and then a fourth screen. So in a large way, Robert Redford is the godfather of the Flicks, and any success that they had is based on Robert Redford.
Well, that is such a fun story. Thank you for sharing that. I was going to say, as our Flicks aficionado, thank you so much for sharing that little bit of Flicks history with us.
Absolutely. So yeah, this week I'm think I'll go see All the President's Men again.
Well, my pick of the week, I'm excited. I'm calling it. We're in fall season. Close enough. We're here. And how I always know that it's fall season is the pumpkin patches and corn mazes start opening. And they're open. I am so ready. I'm ready to be cozy. I'm ready for pumpkin patch season. And I double checked. 2 of my favorite places are already open. The Farmstead on South Eagle Road is open in Cuna, and Shindig Farms in Nampa is also open.
Cool.
They're open weekdays and weekends now. I believe 4 to 9 p.m. most days. So right when school's getting out. And I'm ready. I'm ready for apple cider donuts. I'm ready for the corn mazes. I'm just ready for all of it. So my pick of the week is I'm speed running fall season. I'm ready for it to be here.
Wow. And I guess it's okay to get a pumpkin early. Yeah. And then maybe get another one closer to Halloween.
Exactly. Well, it's never too early for porch pumpkins. And then we can get carving pumpkins a little closer. So
can I tell you a quick story? When I owned a home on North 12th Street a number of years ago, and I love to garden. And one year I decided to plant pumpkins. And my brother-in-law said, do you know what you're doing? I said, yeah, I'm going to plant pumpkins. And I planted them everywhere. And I had a pretty good-sized garden. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. They kept coming and coming and I was giving pumpkins to anyone who even looked at me. I was putting them out on my porch just saying, help yourself. I think there were 100+ pumpkins that grew. And then the worst thing are those vines. They're like rope when you're trying to get them out. But growing pumpkins, it was lovely while they were growing, but oh my gosh, it's so difficult. Now I leave it to the pros.
Well, George, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to break down some of this week's biggest headlines.
Lots of fun. Thanks, Lindsay.
Before we go, I wanted to welcome Evan and Stacy G as our newest CityCast Boise neighbors. Thank you so much for joining the neighborhood. Your support keeps the show going. If you haven't heard about CityCast Neighbors, it's our new membership program where for just $10 a month, you get great perks like ad-free listening, an exclusive weekly events calendar, and the chance to shout out a local nonprofit or business you love. This week, Ashley Z is shouting out the Ruth Melliker Bird Rescue. They helped rehab an injured bird she found, and they always need funding and support. And our neighbor Rebecca C wants you to check out Rediscovered Books' new location on Grove Street. Consider this your personal invitation. We'd love to hear about the groups and businesses that you think make Boise shine. Become a CityCast Boise neighbor, send us your shout out, and we'll share it with the community. Go to membership.citycast.fm to sign up today. That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show is produced by Evelyn Avitia, Frankie Barnhill, Zoe Culkin, and me, Lindsay Van Allen. Blake Hunter and Natalia Aldana wrote our Hey Boise newsletter this week, and our music is by Up As The Down As The and All The Kimonos. If you enjoyed our show today, leave us a review. It helps other people find us. We'll be back on Monday to look at what's happening to local free speech. Catch you then.